can.
One thing that intrigues, well, just last night my wife and I was talking about you, was the title of the book, Tragedy and Hope.
Yes, because
it's such a large title.
Yes. Now, what it means is this. I think it is absolutely tragic. It is shameful. It is sinful that Western civilization is going to go down the drain. When I wrote that book, which is less than 10 years ago, I had hope that we could save Western civilization. I am extremely skeptical now that it can be saved. I think we're just about finished.
Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. That clip that you just heard was taken from the last interview of Carol Quigley, author of Tragedy and Hope. And it briefly explains why he wrote the book and what his beliefs were from his analysis of Western civilization as it stood in 1964-65. I've been asked to basically do a book study, a public book study of this phenomenal work. You know, we're going to do an introduction, a formal introduction of who Carol Quigley was, what the book was about, and all that, his background and all that. But right now I'm just going to give you a brief overview, my overview of what the book was and why I'm doing the book study. It's been said and it's been written that there's going to be a clash of civilizations. I disagree. Why? Because I believe there's only one civilization, and it's Western civilization. I know that bothers people, and I know that goes against what everybody's been taught. There are many cultures, but there's only one civilization, and that's Western. And to understand what's going on in the world today, we have to understand Western civilization. What it is, how it evolved, what the processes are, what the inherent strengths and weaknesses are, where it is in its maturation, will help us explain the world we live in right now. It'll explain why our jobs are moving overseas. It'll explain why white people clean the guns. It'll explain why capitalism does what it does with no mercy. It'll explain why politicians do what they do. You know, they didn't just come out of nowhere. This civilization, these processes, you know, that's all a civilization is, are processes. Processes that affect culture, affect the way we live. It affects what we do. And the only way to get a hold of it or to navigate your way through it, you need a map. And I believe that Tragedy and Hope is that map. So we're going to follow Quigley's guide. We're going to follow his steps. We're going to go through what he went through, and we're going to see what he wrote as he did a forensic analysis of this book. Carol Quigley, for people that don't know his background, and most people don't, it's a name. It's a name, a famous name, but it's in conspiracy circles, just like the book. Most people know the name, most people know the book, but most people don't know anything about the guy, the author, or what's in the book. You know, it's probably one of the top two, I would say, at least the top 5 conspiracy books ever written. And like most people in conspiracy books, they look for the conspiracy, they look for the names, they look for the organizations, they look for, the hidden hand that rocks the cradle of civilization. That's what they look for. But when you read one of these books, such as, one of my favorites, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, it's more about facts and it's more about structure than it is about people and places and what they did. Because it's the structure, it's the methods, it's the repeatability that gives you the insight to the world that we live in right now. So we're going to take the book Tragedy and Hope, and hopefully, we're going to get into the conspiracy. That's important. But what we're going to get into is the structure. because people die, institutions fold, they go by the wayside, but the structure, what the Western civilization is based on, its methods, its practices, its architecture, its strengths, its weaknesses is what we need to focus on. And that's what we're going to go through. So, you know, this book is not really for conspiracy theorists, because that's not what it's about. It's not about pointing fingers, because that's not what this book study is going to be about. This book study is going to be about information that you can use, information that can explain your day-to-day life, information that can explain what you see on the news every day, because this book has been used as a template, as a blueprint for the last 35 years. Believe it or not. That's why he was asked to do it. That's why I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Carroll Quigley, when he went to Harvard, he was supposed to be a biochemist, a scientist. You know, he was an expert in physics and mathematics. You know, he was a hard science guy. And he fell in love with history because he liked the way history moved places and things and explained things in his world that physical science couldn't. So he decided to devote the rest of his life to understanding people and organizations and civilizations as they stood. So he became probably the foremost expert in the United States on civilizations. His class, the study of civilizations at Georgetown, was one of the most famous classes probably in the world. You know, Bill Clinton was a protege. You know, all your presidents, you know, took that class. All your foreign service workers, you know, if you wanted to be anybody, you took Quigley's class, whether you got an A in it or you flunked it. You know, he was commissioned to write the first book from that 30 years of study called The Evolution of Civilizations, if my recollection is correct. And from that book, you know, it was an overview of how civilizations, you know, got started, how they processed, how they evolved, how they reached their golden age or their peak, and how they decayed, died, and then became fodder or material for the next civilization. So the Council of Foreign Relations decided to tap into his expertise. They wanted him to do a forensic analysis because this was a Cold War. This was after World War II. This was after the United States basically took over as the policeman of the world. And they wanted to do a forensic analysis of Western civilization because they wanted a blueprint. They wanted a guideline of where they were headed. They wanted the positives and the negatives. So he wrote this, 1,200-page book as a forensic analysis of Western civilization. And he decided to focus it on basically the 100 years from, because the United States became a power in 1865. And they basically became the leader of the world through that 100 years. So that's why he focused on that. But he did an in-depth analysis of Western civilization, of its components, why things happen. And unfortunately for him, he's very accurate. A lot of his predictions, we throw around those predictions in those terms that were basically unknown back when he wrote the book. Now they're common. He predicted the rise of China. He predicted the rise of the Soviet Union as a power. He predicted population pressures, because of the work, the trends that he saw in his work over 30 years. He predicted it so much. He went in such depth that they pulled that book. A lot of conspiracy theorists think it was because they pulled that book or tried to pull that book because of the names that were in it. I beg to differ. I think they pulled that book because that is the template. That is the playbook that they were going to use for the next 35 to 40 to 35 years. So when you look at PNAC, Panel for the New American Century, when you look at the Gulf Wars, when you look at what we're going through right now, a lot of that stuff was predicted by Quigley. In a minute, I'm going to play you a clip as an example of what I'm talking about and how Quigley's work affects us. The reason I've been asked to do this book study is because people need to know, regular people need to know. The people at the top already know this stuff. Most of them do. I can't say all, because a lot of people make money and make decisions that don't have any clue about how the world's work. They don't care. But I want to put this out there for the people that do care, the people that want to know. The people that I talk to on a daily basis that want an explanation. And this is the closest template that I can find. Now, to say something about Carroll Quigley, no, he wasn't a liberal. He was politically agnostic because he didn't like conservatives or liberals. He was a scientist. He was a hardcore agnostic. He was a hardcore scientist. And he let the chips fall where they may. The only thing that Carroll Quigley had a weakness for was Western civilization. He wanted to see it survive. It even colored some of his work. And we're going to get into that later. How his work was colored and how he basically went against some of his own findings, some of his own predictions, because he loved Western civilization so much. But that's not our concern. Our concern are the facts. Our concern is what happened. Our concern is the structure, then the cold hard prediction. And we are going to let the chips fall where they may. We're not going to cut any slack. We're not going to baby anybody. We're not going to be pro or con anything. We are going to look at this book and in light of it as a cold hard fact, as a cold hard forensic analysis of Western civilization, the good and the bad, and where we can find our niche, where we can take advantage of it. If you have a playbook, no matter what side of the line your team is on, if you have the playbook, you have an advantage. And that's what we're going to go through. We're going to go through the playbook. Even amongst the elite, people have problems with Quigley's work. Some agree, some disagree. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to get into what was accurate. And that's the problem. What's accurate. Because no matter what people believe, or what people think, or what their worldview is, the architecture of civilization, of how human beings react, their needs, their wants, their dreams, their greed, when you take them into a collective, you get a template, you get an architecture, you get certain practices, certain repeatability in practices that you can't ignore. And as a collective, and as over time, as this civilization matures, you see signs of it.